I-V-M.
Hey, everybody, got another rebroadcast for you this week. We had a really interesting episode with Kuldeep way back when in June 2017, and we thought it would be interesting to come and talk about that again. Give it a listen. I think you'll really understand. In the meantime, let me tell you a little bit about what's going on our Slack channel. So we asked a really interesting question. Is India missing out on the wheat tech revolution? We asked this in response to last week's episode with Armando. And the answer was an overwhelming yes. More than 90% of the people who responded said that we absolutely are missing the wheat tech revolution. So with that, let's move on with the show.
Hey there, welcome everyone to another episode of Shunya One. This is episode 6 and I'm your host Shiladitya doing this once again. So happy to have everyone back, and it's been a great month of recording 5 podcasts already.
I know, episode 5.
I can't believe it. And
wait, this is
episode 6. So here we are again with my trusted mate Amit Doshi.
Hello.
So how's it going, Amit?
I'm doing well.
How's the week in tech and biz this week?
It's been a really interesting week, man.
Interesting week?
Yeah, it's really interesting. That's why I'm so glad that we got Kuldeep here to talk with us about that.
Yes, so without further ado, let me introduce our guest for today. Sitting across me here is Kuldeep, very good friend Kuldeep, who works at CleverTap, which is a very cool product, which we'll talk a bit about. And also, it's an interesting week that I have Kuldeep here because in the past, he's been with 2 iconic companies who are making a comeback this week, Nokia and Microsoft. So, Kuldeep, why don't you start with your Twitter handle so people know where to reach you, and then tell us about what you've seen in the world of tech so far.
Yeah, hey guys. Yeah, so I am on Twitter at Kuldeep, that's Ku1DWP, because Kuldeep wasn't really available. I joined Twitter a bit late.
But that's still pretty close to your first name.
Yeah, well, used to be a gamer.
And it gives him geek cred.
Yes, it does.
Yeah, lead speak.
Yes. But then shouldn't you have used the 3s instead of the E's?
Yeah, well, too many numbers.
He's also a sales guy.
Yeah, imagine saying Ku1D33P. Yeah, it just wouldn't be half as nice.
Yeah, that's true.
But yeah, great to have you here, Kuldeep. I mean, I know we chat a bunch on Twitter and offline. Probably more than what we should be talking about. But I do want to know, this is an interesting week for Nokia especially. So I want to know about, have you guys seen the new phones?
So I've seen a couple of articles around them. I think it's interesting. They're coming in at interesting price points, right? 9, 12, and 15, which I think makes sense for what they're doing. But they look like, standard, normal, average.
I think they're going the Xiaomi route.
Phones. Yeah.
I know, man. I'll be honest. It's actually a very emotional thing for me because, when I joined Nokia in 2009, this was the N97 year. And, at its inception, the N97 actually outsold the iPhone.
Yes, it did.
And this was the time when, you would have articles appearing that, what is this iPhone thing? And, the Nokia N97 will beat. Why is the Nokia N95 a better phone than iPhone? To go from there to when I finally, left Nokia because we had been acquired by Microsoft, I was there a long time, I would just say that.
Yeah.
And, while it's not really Nokia, it's obviously just the brand coming back. But, you mentioned the Nokia 6. I think it will be priced at 15,000. That's what the blogs are saying.
Something like that, yeah.
Is the price point that Nokia literally owned. I mean, if you look at some of the great Nokia phones, the E63, the phone that competed with.
Yeah.
The E63 and all those, the first Nokia music phone, internally they called it a different name. I mean, I don't remember
I know what you're talking about. It was the one which had the tall phone, right?
The tall phone,
the tall one or the sideways one?
No, the sideways one was the Engage. I used to have that one. That was a gaming phone.
Yeah, right. It's so amazing, right? That we remember Nokia phones as these distinct physical.
Yeah. Exactly, right? I mean, and now there are nothing.
N73, that was the music phone, the N73.
Oh, yeah. Now everything is a black glass rectangle. Not necessarily a bad thing, but, for what it's worth, I think the 15K price point is an amazing price point. And I'll be honest with you, maybe because of my history with Nokia, but I'm very tempted to kind of switch back to that. It's a beautiful device. And,
so for someone on Android, I think it's one more option out there.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it hopefully brings the brands solidarity and I don't know. I mean, it was known for, especially in comparison to what phones today are not known for, is ruggedness.
Ruggedness is one part of it, but also, I mean, like, I always thought Nokia had a great design aesthetic, right? Whether it was the Symbian phones or even the Windows phones that they came out with. And these Android phones that I'm seeing right now, they look like, I mean, like, you turn them off and you put them upside down and you couldn't tell the difference between a Nokia phone, a Micromax phone. They all look the same. And I think that's a little disappointing.
They're playing
to me.
it safe.
But that's what design is, right? In the end, all of these are effectively a derivative of the iPhone design, right?
Essentially.
I mean, how much more could you design around a black rectangle? Having said that, I don't know if you remember the N8. One of the earlier Nokia designs where, I remember the first time they presented it internally, they likened it to a pebble because the glass edges would curve around and the back was curved upwards and the whole thing had this oval profile, if you look at it sideways.
Okay, I think I know what you mean. Yeah. Well, that was...
They came out with MeeGo. N9.
Yes.
It was not the N8. Sorry, it was the N9. It came out with MeeGo.
I know what you're talking about. Yes.
It was an operating system which Nokia was building in collaboration with, pretty much everybody because people just kept leaving and joining the consortium. But it was effectively Linux on the mobile phone.
Correct, right.
And you can design. You can better the design of a black rectangle. And I think every year, what Apple did with the iPhone 6 and then went on to do with 7S, right? Mm-hmm. And then I remember the iPhone 4 when they went all metal from the earlier 3GS. Right. So design's about sweating the finer details, and I think for what it's worth, I for one haven't really seen a phone which has been designed. I mean, there's obviously the iPhone, right? I mean, to credit where it's due. But to me, Nokia phones are always beautifully designed and thoughtfully designed. Right. I mean, the E71,
I love that phone.
The QWERTY device, right?
That's probably been my favorite phone of my entire life. I love that phone like very few other phones.
Absolutely. Blackberries are amazing, but put an E71 right next to it and it feels like a heirloom item, right?
Correct.
It feels like an
old...
No,
listen, this is nostalgia happening in this room, right?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, the news was about their new phones, but it's so ironic that we end up talking about their legacy.
Well, isn't that what great brands are really all about? Correct. I mean, Nokia, I think is, by the way, one thing I learned at Nokia is brands are forever. Right? I mean, brands are the fixed deposit of goodwill that you put in there, right? I mean, Nokia built these great phones and people had these amazing stories and they had this lived experience with this brand that cared. I don't know if you remember that one time that Nokia decided to replace all the chargers because there was some battery mishap that
they did a recall.
They did a recall, right?
Yes.
And they did a recall at the time, but not a lot of the consumers knew what a recall was, right?
Right.
They were all over the airwaves and saying, just call this number or SMS your serial number to this and this short code, and we'll tell you if your phone qualifies for a recall, and then just walk into this place and we'll just give you a new charger or new this, right? Which I think, it probably cost Nokia a lot. It happened before I was at Nokia,
right?
But from every time, you would go meet at these consumer meetings and you meet these consumers, right? And people would just tell you that it's amazing. This is a brand I trust. And I remember when we were failing, which was actually after 2011, it was pretty much...
I want to hear about that. In fact, given that you were inside this large brand which we, like, as we are saying, we all love. Amit, you were even developing on the Symbian platform. I did
a lot of Symbian work for a bunch of years.
Even from a developer's point of view, you saw that they're trying to do stuff.
The thing is, though, it was never as easy to develop on Symbian as it turned out to be for iPhone and Android later. It was always tougher to do Symbian work. But having said that, it was still the earliest platform that was there, right, to do this stuff. It had capability which no other phone came close to being able to touch. So, that's going to lead to complexity of programming necessity. But, I have really fond memories of my Nokia phones.
Yeah, and I think you're understating the case when you're saying it was easy. It was not easy to develop for. Writing for Symbian was you will have an easier time pulling your own teeth out. It was hard. Writing in Symbian C++, it was hard. And as a matter of fact, because you could write some really powerful applications for Symbian, you had access to pretty much the whole hardware stack, right? There was no hardware adaptation layer. There really was, but nothing was really hidden from a Symbian programmer. Even now, right? Every time people say the Apple launched a smartphone revolution, I really want to interject. I know that I would be wrong because Apple did launch a smartphone revolution. But I said, but technically speaking, Symbian, the Symbian devices were the first smartphones. Now, it's not right. I mean, Apple did few things which are different.
Exactly. Apple took it to the next level, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, like it took it to a level which the Symbian phones never would have. I mean, listen, I mean, like Symbian phones could do a lot of the same things that iPhones could do at launch, but it just was not the same experience, right?
It
was not. I mean, like multi-touch really, really, I think changed how phones work in a very positive way, right? I mean, like it turned them into such, I mean, like just the kind of things you could do, right? In terms of games, in terms of just different kind of, just web scrolling, right?
Typing.
Typing, yeah.
Just typing.
All that stuff
I think what the iPhone brought around the touchscreen revolution. The touchscreen phone revolution.
Right.
But as a smartphone, like you said, even a BlackBerry was smart, right? Doing email on your phone was a big step up from doing nothing on your phone.
Yeah, okay. So BlackBerry didn't...
If you talk about internet-connected devices...
so when he was talking about like how you got access to various hardware things on Symbian, BlackBerry didn't really let you do that kind of stuff. BlackBerry was very limited in what kind of stuff you could do.
Correct. But I'm saying these two brands did precede the iPhone.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But
they were still smart.
I think one thing that, I mean, it's very interesting that he says that, right? BlackBerry doing email, because BlackBerry didn't invent email on the phone.
Yeah.
BlackBerry just figured out how to do corporate email really well on the phone.
Correct.
Nokia actually did email on the phone before BlackBerry ever did, right? So much so that I remember, I forgot her name, but this was an SVP of CorpDev who would basically boast that, we invented email on phone. I mean, who cares? BlackBerry really took it to market, right? I think, and if you look back, right, I think it was this hubris that I mean, Nokia was I remember it was a great company to work for, really good people, and the Finns are these, straight talkers and so on and so forth. Very simple people, very minimalistic in design, the Nordic, the whole Scandinavian design thing going on. But I think at some point in time, it just wasn't, you weren't in a place to believe that, you have been outclassed, you have been flanked, you have no chance of competing with this phone unless you drop everything. And I'm talking specifically about the iPhone, right? A lot of people forget that Android didn't exist
Android
when the iPhone came out.
The first few Android phones were terrible.
Android was a feature phone. When iPhone was released, Android looked like a BlackBerry, right? So the reason I think Steve Jobs was really so pissed with Google was because, they say, hey, that's the right model. We're going to create an open version. Of Steve's walled garden, so to speak, right? But the real story in my mind really was that, and we, of course, this was still back in 2010. We still owned like 60% plus of the market. Samsung was some, like what you would think of as Micromax today or some new brand. Samsung was like that, a single digit, maybe slightly lower double digit percentage market share. It was a non-issue, right? You were just making these dumb phones, which, people who couldn't afford a Nokia would go and buy a Samsung phone, right? But Samsung, of course, saw the opportunity on leapfrogging Nokia by, betting big on Android, which obviously was a great story. And it was really painful. It wasn't losing the mind share to Apple that was painful. It was losing the market, at least in India, to Samsung on an ongoing basis, month after month, quarter after quarter, half after half, and knowing that there is really nothing you can do about it.
What was happening on the inside? How do you, it was a huge brand. It was a huge company. It was doing massive sales. What happens in a brand like this? And I know we've spoken about this before, that this is where obviously the technology, this is technology churn. The world goes through it. Things change, and things change real fast in technology. Things can literally change overnight in the technology timeline sense. But what happens? What causes a big brand like this and allows a startup or per se or other such companies who are just coming into the fray to capture market so fast? And how did that look on the inside?
Well, it's obviously, I think, one of the greatest case studies that business schools will be looking at for years to come, right? How do you go from, if you were just looking at the India market specifically, globally, Nokia was a force to be reckoned with, but never in the US or Japan for that matter, right? Those were the two key markets. And interesting thing about those, by the way, the fulcrum of innovation on mobile used to be Japan, shifted to Europe, and eventually shifted to US. And US still remains the center point for mobile innovation. Right? Look at all the top apps on your store. They all literally come out of the US. And by the way, one of the reasons why iPhone is a big success is because, Steve Jobs saw that Valley is where what's going to write the software of the future, and he just built a platform where, the software of the future is going to be written. Like it or not, iPhone is where the next innovative software is being written, right? Now, what was happening inside Nokia, right? And, remember that, I was initially a product manager building out some products and then, went on to do developer relations. But I think, a lot of people have different theories, but I'll tell you, this is what I saw. And what I've learned from this is nobody really competes with themselves, right? No company ever competes with itself, right? Every time somebody say that, we should do this, there'll always be a business manager somewhere sitting there. That's all right. But I pay your damn bills on a daily basis, right? And that is happening because we're selling these simple 1,000 rupees phones, right? The Nokia 1100 was actually,
super popular, black and white, simple, straightforward.
Yeah, I must have bought 7 of those phones. Seriously, I just buy them and give them to people in the office, give them to your guy at home. Just I must have bought so many.
It was cheaper than a SIM card.
Yeah, it was.
It was cheaper than a SIM card with a pack. But that's the problem. I actually genuinely think that there was a moment when, there were these vision statements, and I remember Stephen Lop saying that we got to be connecting the next billion. But the next billion doesn't pay your bills. The first billion does, right? Where would you rather be? Would you rather be the phone that the whole of South Bombay carries? And I mean South Bombay as a metaphor, right? Or would you rather be the phone that rest of India carries? I would actually say that if South Bombay carried my phone, rest of India will eventually get there.
Correct.
Right? It's correct. Was that also, I think there was a feeling internally that, we can't beat Apple because by this time, between 2009 to 2013, 2014, people like to say that Apple's no longer innovative. I think the latest WWDC changed that because, obviously the whole AR kit and whatnot, and core ML, right, doing machine learning inside the phone and all that's really amazing. But that's when, every time Jobs went on the stage and talked about the new phone, I remember they were calling it the God phone, the Jesus phone, and what have you, right? I think we just choked, right? Yeah. I know there's a lot of colleagues listening right now and saying, they're just calling me names now probably. But I saw some amazing innovation happen, right? Force touch that Apple does, right? Mm-hmm. We had something, I saw some very cool stuff that was happening.
Early on in
R&D.
Right.
Then, we saw, there was work happening. We were thinking we'll build wrist devices, we'll build that devices. We did a tablet, which was a beautiful tablet, right?
Oh yeah, I remember that. That was a great tablet.
Yeah, I don't actually.
Oh yeah, there was a tablet we eventually put Windows 8 on.
Yeah, it was something kind of weird, right?
Yeah, it was a beautiful device, right? There was just so much stuff that happened, but it was all too late because the key thing was nobody realized that you need to give up on what you're doing right now and you need to react to this new challenge. Because, the reason I'm hesitating is because, even at that time, I didn't belong to that. I didn't know it then. I know it now, right? Hindsight's, 20/20 and, you can always see perfectly clear what happened back then. But, say maybe we will do this and maybe we will do that. But what was really happening was that anybody who bought an iPhone would essentially be, is a market that you can never address with a Nokia or a Samsung anymore. And that's how iPhone won, right? Yeah. You just had so much consumer wow. And we were focused on that, can I grow the market? When this guy was saying, I am going to win this market. I'm going to away from them, right?
That's interesting. I like that formula. That makes sense. And I think, that sounds really, that's actually a great insight, yeah.
You take a look at a sales guy, something that I do today, right? And if you were to tell me how to solve a problem, I'll solve the problem by thinking I'll do more of what I'm doing. When what you need to do is that you need to stop what you're doing and you need to react to this new threat. Of course, the key insight is in reacting and knowing this threat. And by the way, interestingly, a lot of people left Nokia during those days because they saw what was happening. They saw that, we actually launched a camera with 42 megapixels. I still own the 1020. It's a beautiful phone. It takes great photographs, does this oversampling where a 42 megapixel image is reduced to 5 megapixel and it's beautiful. Just like it takes images like SLR. Great innovation. Yep. Was wasted on a Windows phone.
Yeah.
Right? One thing that, a lot of people thought that Stephen Lop would do was that, maybe he'll adopt Android. Which, by the way, for what it's worth, I think would have been a winning strategy. Which is what's coming out, which is why I'm saying that this is what we should have done a long time ago. Except back then, we would have been the first one to introduce a 42 megapixel phone on Android. Right? That would have been a selling thing. A 42 megapixel camera, which takes great images, great selling point. Oh, but it's got Windows Phone on it. So, we're not going to buy it. Nobody bought it.
Yeah.
Literally.
No, so I think, while you can have the brand, you can have the market share, I think it's losing sight of, or at least having a fresh insight. I think that's what startups do, right? We talk about startups here a lot, and we were saying that this ability or inability for a large company to compete with itself is what allows a startup to come in and, pull the rug under their feet. I mean, it may not be overnight like how when a behemoth like Apple does it. Obviously, Apple did it with massive, capital and marketing and whatnot. So they saw that this was this tidal wave coming their way, and
but actually, if you think about it, all three of the players that came in exchange for when Nokia died down, right? Apple, Google, and Microsoft, which failed. But these are all three of the guys who came into the mobile operating system space. None of these are exactly capital-starved companies. None of these are what you would call startups, right? So maybe an operating system is the kind of thing that requires really deep pockets to penetrate.
And it wasn't just an operating system. It was an entire ecosystem of
building.
Devices.
Yeah.
So, but at the same time, it was someone in each of these companies who started this.
Yeah,
someone who figured that, you can take down a behemoth like a Nokia.
Yeah,
because there's a sea change in consumers happening. Startups, not every startup guy is great at sales. I would
actually say that most startups actually don't think about sales until it hits them in the face.
Yeah.
Correct. So that's also something I think which we should, it's a good insight for our people to understand why thinking of sales, and I'm not talking just for thinking numbers and thinking revenue models, which everyone talks about now, that instead of
going out and selling, man.
Going out and selling.
That's
going out and selling,
think,
and hence knowing what's out there.
Yeah.
I think is a very important skill which every startup should have, right? Every founder should have.
Yeah, and it's not an easy one to kind of find either, right? Or it's not an easy one to develop.
I mean, I think
that way, since even before this, Kuldeep, I know you've worked in the SME industry in India.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've done SME sales as a product services company myself. Yeah. Selling was essentially like second nature.
Yes.
To most people who started out then, because you essentially had to go convince the world that, hey, I am relevant.
Yes.
And especially the analogy you told us about how Indian markets are all clustered. Like I am usually, if I go to the railway station now, there's a Xerox shop. Oh, it's not one, it's 50 Xerox shops right next to each other.
Yeah.
Or if I go to some place where they sell clothes, it's 50 of them together.
Yes.
So Indian SMEs have always been used to selling neck to neck, literally, with people who are exactly like them, and trying to win one consumer from each other.
It's so interesting you mentioned that, actually, because the whole clustering thing. Sorry to interrupt you, but the whole clustering thing you talk about, right? I mean, if you look at how industries are spread, right? I mean, you can, for example, look at if you can look at Ahmedabad, right, and you'll know that a lot of pharma companies, which of course they eventually moved to Himachal Pradesh because they gave them some excise cut and Baddi became the pharma hub. But
that's manufacturing.
That's
they're still based out of a lot of them.
Yeah,
are
but
based
here's
on
the thing, right?
So.
Indian businesses have always reacted in a way where they need to organize, and one way they found to organize, in my opinion at least, is that they cluster around each other. You go to Tirupur, where almost half of cotton hosiery in the country is done, or you go to Bhilwara, right, which is where kind of close to Chittor, Udaipur, right, where almost half of India's polyester is done, right, right outside Bhiwandi, where huge number, there are literally looms and looms, right, because right outside Bombay, right, Bombay is a big cloth center.
Right.
A lot of these businesses cluster together, they face the same business challenges and so on and so forth. So I think fundamental of running a business in India is, right, if you don't know how to sell, right, you will lose your identity because you'll be lost among a crowd.
Correct.
Nobody will see you fail. You'll just disappear in the background. Right. Which is why I think when you mention startups, where there's some startups who clearly cannot sell. I mean, there's some startups, just all about the product. They're all about the softer disciplines, and I don't mean it in the sense. I don't mean soft in a bad way. What I mean is that you can have a great product, you can have great package, you can have a great vision, you can be executing brilliantly, but in the end, someone has to translate it into money. Someone has to translate it into a partnership.
And this is even for, and since now, you've moved into a SaaS product role, even for SaaS, which is essentially known for being able to just put it up online and it'll sell itself, or at least you use marketing channels which are purely tech. That never happens.
That never happens.
I think that's very, very rare. Like, something like Slack, maybe a little bit. But that
I still think enterprise sales for Slack, there are people who
they
call
don't.
You
they actually don't have enterprise sales for Slack. So there's a big debate around Slack versus Atlassian. Atlassian has typical enterprise sales, and it's a similar product to Slack. HipChat, I think that's what it's called. Yeah, so HipChat's a similar product to Slack, and they have enterprise sales. Slack's strategy is to convert one person in an organization and then create teams and build teams from that, right? So they get me and my company. I'll push Slack out to the rest of the people over here. And it's cheap enough, and there's no setup, and it's all simple enough that I can just do it off my credit card.
So that's talking to the consumerization of IT, where you sell to people, not to a CIO.
Not to the department.
Not to a CIO. Yeah. I mean, one great analogy, and that you see all the time, is that Microsoft in the initial days only had 500 customers. If you go to the Fortune 500 at the CIOs, if you got them mapped, you can do a lot of business there, right? Of course, you don't sell Slack to a CIO, right? You sell Skype for Business now, right? Earlier it used to be called, I even forgot the brand.
Teams, Microsoft Teams.
No, the chat product that they had.
Oh, yeah. What was that called?
Never mind.
Link, wasn't it?
Link. Wow, I used Link for 6 years and I've forgotten what it's called. Go figure, right?
Yes.
Impact of Slack. I use Slack every day, right? Now, the difference between, by the way, HipChat and Slack would be that Slack's early in its cycle, right? I bet you in a year from now, Slack, once they start to see those pressures, right? I mean, they have huge valuation, right?
Yeah.
They got to justify the market.
In fact, they were also in the news this week because Amazon has shown a certain interest.
Like $5 billion for Slack, I think every major corporate software should be buying it. If that's the valuation that they're going out at right now, just the sheer amount of mind space that they have in the tech world, in the journalism world, and all of that space. Because all these are the teams that basically use this stuff, right?
Yeah, because there's just so much money there. But let me ask you this: do you really see a Wipro employee going up to their CIO and saying, "Hey, we really should be adopting Slack"? No, you got to go sell to the CIO, and eventually Slack will have to have a enterprise. I mean, I think they already do. By the way, I mean, I was reading. They already do. But it's going to become more and more important. So you got to have a sales team. In the earlier days, we didn't really have sales. I mean, I didn't start off as a sales guy. I started off as a customer success guy. My job was to drive communication or conversations with our consumers. Right. Before you have customers, you have consumers. Because you don't have consumers, you'll never have customers, right? I mean, if no one consumes your service, no one's going to pay for it.
That is true.
Right? So, in early days, you don't need a sales guy as much as you need an evangelist. Right? Somebody who just talks about it.
That's what I'm trying to understand. Like most people, like you said, now more so maybe founders are product founders. So they think product, they think. Very few of them even think tech, to be honest. Most of us in India at least think business first. Then we go find a tech guy to help us with. And that's been the natural order of things. But when does that transition? I mean, again, you don't want to become a big company too soon and have enterprise sales and do sales the traditional way. You still want to leverage what the startup ecosystem lets you do, which is like build tech and scale fast through technological means. At the same time, you don't want to lose touch with your end customers, right? You don't want to lose sight of what people really want on the ground. So how do you strike that interesting balance? And in the context of SaaS, since we're talking about SaaS, I know like Slack as a SaaS product is probably one which is really visible out there. But there's so much in between, which still makes money, which still sells. People are still selling. And I'm not even talking about the Freshworks, Freshdesk kind of guys who are very visible in the news. I'm talking about software which is not so visible. There are products out there. When the need arises, maybe someday, depending on who you are in the organization, you go out looking. I see tweets from people about what's the best HR software. Can someone suggest a cloud-based, CRM for me, please? Everyone knows Salesforce, but obviously everyone can't afford it. So how? What's the key to success for a SaaS product to go out there, and what are the games someone has to play? I think it could be an interesting thing to understand.
So I mean, it is interesting, right? I mean, I think the thing with SaaS more than anything else is it's easier to take that bite, right? I mean, we use almost everything as like a service product, right? I don't think that there's any single software that we have bought. Adobe is SaaS. Pro Tools, which is what we use our audios for, that's we use that on subscription. Google on a subscription. Slack on a subscription. Everything that we use inside our office is pretty much on a subscription right now, and it's just the amount of
no. So I mean, from your point of view, you know what you need, so you go out there and find it.
Right.
I'm talking about from a company on the inside. How do they go out and figure who are they going to sell to?
I mean, I hate saying that there is a template to this, but what I can talk to is the things I learned and the lived experience of when I came in, right? Anand, who's the founder at CleverTap, Anand Jain, right? I mean, first of all, the first thing I learned is that if your founder isn't selling, right, you're screwed.
Yeah.
I mean, if your founder can't sell, and if you're a sales guy looking to join a startup or tech company, here's my advice: just don't join that company. If the first sale has to be done by you and not by your founder,
yeah,
right, you will never know what you're selling, because you're a startup. Your product is going to be completely different a year from now than you are today. Because the whole point of a startup is to react very quickly to market forces, because you don't have a legacy of 15, 20 years, right? That the Nokia example I was giving, right? Apple could build from scratch because they didn't have to worry about an existing market share. They had nothing to lose, right? As a startup, you have nothing to lose. So if your founder doesn't sell, don't sell. Right. Having said that, it doesn't have to be a great sales guy, but she needs to be, for that matter, right? I mean, I'm sorry, I mean he in the sense he or she needs to be able to articulate that what your product is, and that articulation cannot come in form of a document. It needs to come in form of a customer or consumer conversation that you're a part of.
And that literally means a conversation.
That literally means a
phone
conversation.
Call, a meeting, and that's still relevant in today's day and age.
Yeah, you show up. I mean, Skype's great. And you do Skype when you can no longer afford to fly to Bangalore or Chennai or Thailand, for that matter, right? We're a hyper-connected world. But, the first few sales you're not going to make on... there's a lot of people who tell, you can do remote sales. And yes, you can. But if you're a startup and if you're really trying to figure out who you are, trying to get to an MVP, that sale will never happen over Skype.
You got to touch people, man. You got to talk to them, and you got to understand what they need from what you're doing, right? I mean, like if they, because you have as a founder, I mean, I'm sure you face the same thing, right? I had a certain idea of how I'm going to make money doing this business. That's not at all what's happening.
Of course.
I mean, like we're making, our revenue comes from entirely different ways. So,
and you learn that.
As you do that, right? So when you start talking to people and understand what they need from you, that's when you'll be able to figure out how you can get them to bite on something.
Yeah, and one of the realization, as I said, right? One is that you got to make sure your founder sells, right? And just talking to extending that same point a little bit. One of the things I learned was the world's more complex than we think it is. Mm-hmm. Everything is a market. Right? You said, right? There are people say, I want the best HR software. And sometimes you go and meet people who use an HR software that you've never heard of.
Yeah.
We think that, how the hell did you discover this guy? Because somebody showed me this, and it met my needs, and I bought it.
Yeah.
I wasn't worried about that. Is this the best HR software in the world? Right? Best because you read, if you go online and you look for reviews and what is the best, XYZ software for
CRM,
my needs. Best CRM, right? Perhaps you are looking to buy the best. Right, but there is somebody who's perfectly happy using a CRM that no one's heard of and is being serviced out of some small boutique software firm out of Ahmedabad, and that person's perfectly happy. That person's not going out to buy Salesforce. They're saying, what? This person shows up, they treat us well, and when they come Diwali, they send us a box of mithai. Everything has a market.
Right.
Eventually what happens though is, if your ambition is that we are going to be $1 billion company or a $10 billion company, right? I mean, unicorns no longer a word that anybody wants to use anymore. But if you're ambitious to be $1 billion, then you gotta play with the big boys, right? Yeah. And you gotta say, how do we scale? How do we stop being boutique, right? In which case you need to know that you need to have that narrative that will be to some extent viral, where you have some customers who will tell other customers about your product, and so on and so forth, right? And because everything is a market, by definition, the first thing that you need to know and where the confidence is going to come from is that you will sell eventually. Because one of the places where salesmen choke, right, is they're saying ki ye to bikega nahi. This won't sell, right? Which is the first thing you need to get over this. And what I did to get over this was very simple. I had a mentor who was my ex-boss at Nokia, and he said, you know what? The only thing necessary to sell is to have enough conversations. And he had this rule of thumb. He used to say 30. It took me 50 conversations. And the first sale that I made was a really nice, meaty sale. It was a few $1,000s a month. And it was a nice way to start. And I got lucky. Right. Absolutely. I mean, I had no right to win that sale. But it was my 50-second conversation. And then, out of the blue, I'm having the third meeting and I have no expectation to sell, because you can imagine I was 50 conversations. I was 6 months into having these conversations. No one's really buying. Yeah. They were all nice people and I was able to make nice conversation, but no one's really buying. And suddenly the guy says, all right, what's your price? And I had no idea. I don't know what I was going to price myself at. So, a frantic call follows to Anand. They say, hey, Anand, what are we priced at? Anand says, hey, itna de de. And we literally, undercut ourselves. I still have that customer and we still service that customer at prices which are 1/10 of our current prices. Right? But,
wow.
But it was...
No, but early wins, right?
So
you need those wins.
Not just early wins, but I think the key takeaway here is that having that conversation. Yeah. So whether that conversation is with one-on-one with a customer or with your early users of your MVP or whoever it may be, that conversation is very essential, I think. And that's where, even when a startup becomes that big, what you're not doing is having the conversations with your end market probably, or your down channel is not giving you enough feedback all the way up that, no, listen, this is the conversation I'm having, you need to change.
Yeah, by the way, can I just say that that advice is very banal. I mean, everybody knows that's good advice and everybody knows it's great advice. Right. The problem with following that advice is that you don't know how many conversations you need to have.
Yeah.
Right.
I was given an arbitrary number of 30. Trust me, my 31st conversation, I was like, 30 bola tha. They said 30 mein ho jayega. I'll make a sale on the 30th conversation, but it didn't happen, right? So I had no option but to go on. Yeah. Those were really depressing, dark times. Right. That's another thing you need to learn as a sales guy, right? There is light at the end of the tunnel, right?
Yeah, someone needs to give you hope.
And actually, that's a good point about startups particularly, right? I mean, you're putting out a new product, right? So, I mean, your sales cycles are going to be long. You can't assume that you're going to have short sales cycles. It's going to take forever to get somebody to convince them to use your stuff. It just takes time. And I think that's something that a lot of early entrepreneurs kind of just assume that, hey, we got something good, we're going to be able to go out and give it to somebody, and this big brand is going to pay us big money.
Yes.
You discover your sales cycle.
No, so nothing is set in stone in the way to do business, but this is how it most likely is to happen. And I think that's the sort of the takeaway for now. So on that note, I think we're going to take a quick short break and come right back.
Hey, it's been another great week on IVM Podcast. If you're not following us on social media, please make sure you do. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. This week we have a new history podcast, Echoes of India with Anirudh Kanisetti. The inaugural episode narrates the story of Gandhara, the melting pot of the ancient world where Indo-Greeks worshipped Greco-Indian gods. On Cyrus is joined by Varun Dugirala, co-founder and content chief at The Glitch. Varun recollects his early days as an intern on MTV Pakra, his many oddball jobs, and his new podcast, Advertising is Dead. Yes, that's right, he has a new podcast. Launching on the 27th, each week Varun will discuss the changes and developments in the business of advertising, branding, content, media, and a whole range of issues that exist within the industry. Episodes are out every Tuesday. On The Scene and the Unseen, Amit Verma is joined by author and journalist Matt Ridley to discuss the evolution of the universe, life, culture, our minds, and our futures. On the Geek Fruit podcast, Tejas and Dinkar slowly lose their mind while they're trying to process just how much they were disappointed by the Fantastic Beasts sequel. Last week on IVM Likes, Abbas and Surbi talk about Homecoming the podcast versus Homecoming the show. Also, we're reaching 100 episodes of IVM Likes soon. Share your favorite moments from the show with us and your most memorable recommendations. You can write to us at shows@indusvox.com. Also, send us a voice note if you can, and we'll play it on the 100th episode. And with that, let's continue on with your show.
Hey, welcome back, guys. So we're continuing to chat about SaaS and sales, and I think it's a very important point of discussion, especially in the tech, you can say the business of technology, right?
Yeah,
I mean, here we talk about tech and we talk about business as well. Knowing how to sell and especially the right kind of advice for selling. I mean...
And the importance of sales too, right? I think that's something we touched on a little bit, but I feel that a lot of startups are so product focused and that they forget about how important revenue is in terms of running a business, right? Because you get some funding. Okay, I got 2 years burn. Now I don't need to sell. Now, okay, I need to make my product. I need to get my consumers. And the thing is that the importance of just how important it is to generate revenue is kind of lost sometimes, I feel like, in some way.
We went through so many waves which sort of all the early VC wave in India basically said, don't worry about revenue, it will come. But I mean, again, that's what most people saw. What they didn't see is it was after a bunch of due diligence about how eventually all of these businesses will make money in some way, is probably what a VC also still sees. The story has come back to revenue now today when things have started failing, and it's very visible that some of them didn't think about revenue and so on.
Yeah, some of these guys did not think about revenue and in good ways at all.
No, so I think in the context of what we were discussing earlier about large companies, right? Large companies typically become large because they know how to sell, right? I mean,
obviously.
You don't become that big in revenue terms. And I'm not talking about the overinflated valuation-driven ones. Yeah. But the revenue, the guys who actually bring in revenue know how to sell.
Yes, you do.
And there's a lot to learn from that. Like beyond the banal advice, right?
Yeah.
Beyond the advice which everyone knows, which is have the conversation and so on, there's a lot to learn. So on the enterprise side, like, you've also worked with big giants like Microsoft. And Microsoft had a great sales team and still does probably.
I think they are one of the best. They're the company that understands sales the best. I mean,
and they have been for more than a decade, like multiple
more than 3 decades.
Yeah.
Steve Ballmer, I think, would go down. I mean, the man's still kicking, and he's still the energetic guy there is. But if there was one guy that you want to know as the doyen god of
single greatest salesman,
single greatest salesman alive, man, Steve Ballmer. I mean, he was an early employee. And he had just come in to sell, and across 30 years, right down to, I think, his last day. I mean, I like to think that just before Ballmer left, he probably looked at some really big. He just patted a really big salesman on a pat for a big sale, because I think that guy is a hardcore sales guy.
Yeah. Right.
I mean, there's a lot of lessons there, but again, just to be clear, when I was at Microsoft, I only spent very little time there. It was a company that's so laser focused on numbers and metrics, right? Which actually, at the time, was probably not what Microsoft needs right now, which is, I think, why Satya is bringing so much freshness, right? Microsoft School again. When do you think that'll happen?
Yeah,
right?
I know.
Microsoft School again. Wow. I mean, you look back and think, really? I lived to see this?
Yeah. Microsoft makes one of the better iOS apps.
They make a lot of the best apps. I mean, like iOS, Android too. I mean, like Office on Android is so far superior to any of the Google Doc products. It's not even like, we're talking night and day.
Yeah.
We're talking night and day. I mean, like Office on Android is fantastic.
Which is kind of a counter narrative to what we're talking about, right? I mean, sometimes your sales guy would lead you in exactly the wrong direction that you need to go. Which is why, the point that, we were earlier talking about, right? That, you focus on product, but you don't focus on sale. Again, like all good advice, this is about balance, right?
Of course.
I mean, again, and this is again to the theme, right? The beautiful thing about being in the startup ecosystem is, right? You go on Twitter and you get so much amazing advice. Only problem with that advice is, and all of it's, almost all of it is good advice. The problem with this is that nobody can tell you when will that good advice start working. And almost all advice is good advice in hindsight. Everybody will, I told you, right? I mean, my mentor told me that, have 30 conversations, you'll be fine. What that did was, it made me realize that let me just talk to 30 people, have genuine, relevant conversation where there might be a feeling on the table that they might want to buy. It didn't work. I was depressed. But then because I had said I'd done 30, might as well keep on going because, the salary check is still coming in end of every month, right? Even though you never, no true sales guy will ever just really join a startup just for the salary check. You have to have a mission, not a job. But, and then I realized that, we were getting closer to this. I was learning new things. For example, never just overtly sell. Have a conversation. Banal advice about listen more. Everybody knows listening more is good, but how many of us really do? And here's the problem. Nobody tells you how to listen more, right?
And listen doesn't just mean keep quiet while the other person is talking. It means listen to what they're saying.
Drive the conversation in the right direction. Yeah. But then, you learn this. And I'll be honest with you. The first 30 conversations and then the next 20, that one that I had to do because I'm thinking, I just need to get paid and just go home because this is not selling, right? And, it flows. Even your founder, you're a Friday evening, you're sitting there, and this guy has obviously got to be the cheerleader, right? Say, no, we will, and we will get there, and, rah, go, and so on and so forth. But then you say, man, I just had this conversation, this guy just don't want to buy. And you see this, that there is some fear in him, and like, wow, things are really bad. And then suddenly you're just doing what you're doing, and then suddenly you sell. I think the core thing about a lot of this, as I said, you get a lot of good advice, and I've learned this, I think. Now when people give me advice which sounds right, I actually ask them that, tell me how it worked for you. I think when you get good advice and you feel it's good advice, you should really ask people to tell their story about how their advice worked for them. Because maybe I'm lucky, maybe it just happened to me, but almost every single good thing that we did at CleverTap, right, usually came from somebody just sitting down with us over a cup of chai and explaining that, maybe you want to try that. And this is how it worked for me. In my
context
is everything for advice. And the beautiful thing about the Indian startup ecosystem is, and I'm still surprised that people think this is surprising, is that help is available all the time. It is. I mean, you ask on Twitter that, hey, does anybody know this? And usually you'll have 2 or 3 guys trolling you. One guy is making fun of you, and there'll be 3 people who'll actually be pointing out to you, pointing you in the right direction, right?
That's right.
I've made some great friends. For example, how the hell did I meet you? I met you on Twitter. Right?
Of course.
I mean, I didn't know who you were, and as a matter of fact, we have this bunch of friends who I don't know in real life, right? Twitter is an amazing platform, and
it is, yeah.
And you can get a lot of. I mean, again, one of the things, by the way, I still look at a sales guy, and I'm hiring, by the way, is if you are not on Twitter, saying you will probably have trouble selling to the startup crowd. You don't know who's
correct. And that's,
fair point.
Especially the kind of SaaS products are out there. Most of them try to sell the startups first.
Startups are easy. They don't have like legacy stuff that they have. They don't have 20 different systems already which you need to integrate in. So jumping in right over, just jumping in directly into startups makes sense, right?
Also, startups have this thing, right, that they want to solve a problem and move on to solving the bigger ones.
Yeah, right? Correct. They don't want to spend extra engineering time on things which they don't need to solve themselves.
Yeah, ironically, it's only the small and medium startups that want to do it. The bigger startups for a long time just want to build everything in-house.
Oh, yes. And again, that's when they stop being a startup, in the true sense, and they become... again, in the news today was Flipkart trying to build an app of all apps and follow the WeChat model. Even that was they're again trying to do that.
I just don't get this. I mean, don't they know what happened to Yahoo? I mean, what is this whole app of app things? I mean, India is not China, man. That's WeChat.
Exactly.
No, if that's to happen, there are other platforms that already have entrenched. How are you gonna get that kind of install base on an app of all apps? That just sounds like...
No, so again, right, this is something which they are choosing to spend engineering prowess behind. And after they have, again, when you're that big, probably you can afford to do a few experiments, and they have. Again, Flipkart is those companies we can talk about every week because they're always doing something.
Yeah.
They're always doing. They're doing PhonePe offline payments this week also.
Okay.
They're doing app of all apps. And these are things which they probably announce, and some team somewhere hired inside the company gets to build them. But a lot of times, and coming back to the Microsoft example, a lot of times these innovations do work out, and these things which are departures from your core product do work out, right? And when you said Satya is bringing Microsoft back and making it cool again, it required a fundamental departure from the top of the way they wanted to do things.
Yeah, right? I think Satya just has the humility to know that, look, if we just keep acting like we're the top dog, right? And my favorite image is when Microsoft launched Windows Phone, they actually had a mock funeral of the iPhone.
Wow,
I'm sure there are a lot of people really embarrassed about this, especially those guys who were in that photo. My favorite thing to want to know is I want to know where they are now and how do they explain their presence in that photo. There was actually a mock funeral. There was here's in the coffin with whole iPhone. It didn't turn out that way. I think Satya has the humility to realize that he's humble enough to know that that Microsoft is no longer the top dog, but what Microsoft does best. For example, for all intent and purpose, it's still the largest software company in the world. Yes. It still has a lot of people writing amazing code. It still runs the world's computers, right? A computer on every desktop was Bill Gates' vision. And, just because you're no longer owning a brand new market doesn't change the fact that you still have a billion plus install base out there, right? how can you leverage that? How can you leverage the fact that you probably have the best software developers in the world, right? How, for example, I think didn't they acquire this company out of Pune? There was a development center out of Pune, Accompli, and rebrand it as Accompli, was it? Rebranded it as Outlook, which an Outlook is now.
Yeah, Accompli was the mail app which they acquired.
Which they rebranded it to Outlook.
Who had a back-end dev team in Pune.
Correct,
yes.
Which, by the way, it was such a surprising move. I'm like, Microsoft can write any app they want, but they said, you know what? Time is important.
No,
These guys do it well.
They did the same thing with a calendar called Sunrise.
Oh yeah.
I used to love Sunrise. So that annoyed me though when they turned Sunrise off and just made it integrated into Outlook.
Yeah, I actually see a lot of angst on that on Twitter. But here's a cool thing, right? When Microsoft thinks that it's probably better to acquire an app like Sunrise rather than writing their own, especially when they probably have tens of thousands of software engineers. I mean, they already do, right? I mean, I've been to Redmond and there's a whole city. Microsoft is not a campus, it's a city, right? There are buses running between buildings and whatnot, right? And then you have a company that says, you know what, we are gonna build this in-house, we're gonna build that in-house, right? I mean, I think at some scale, when you've earned the right, when you've reached the pinnacle of whatever that you were doing, right? You need to kind of do some tangential innovation. You need to, to build out a lot of other stuff. But, you hear these stories about people saying that, we're not going to buy analytics. We're just going to build our own. And you know what?
That's
fine.
Foolish.
That may be fine. Maybe
that's foolish, man. I mean, like, there are some things which you need deep expertise to build. Analytics is one of those things.
But that's what they do. They hire deep expertise. But the problem is the moment you have deep expertise on analytics and you're inside a company, your incentives change, right? If you're a star hire and I bring you into a company, right? Maybe you have a mission, maybe you succeed, right? I'm not discounting that. But the problem is that no one inside your organization is going to build a better tool than what a company whose survival depends on that tool is going to build, right? I mean, you can go buy there is no piece of software that you cannot go out and buy, right? I mean, again, I'm biased to this because I sell these tools, right? So, don't take me completely on my word, but, I really think that instead of hiring these great stars who can build out these great components, who, are justified saying that this is a strategic thing that we're building, right? Your business is your business, right? Don't try to, vertically integrated company, building a vertically integrated company out of India, if you have less than a few $1 billion, it's going to be very, very hard, right? It's like, it's like Ola manufacturing cars
That's also, I mean, that actually touches upon a topic which we talk about here often also, or rather it's relevant to this conversation, is the fact that people forget the numbers behind most businesses or potential sales, right? When you go out to start a product company or a company in general, you should know how big that market is. And coming back to the point where even today people ask, what's the best HR software? And like you said, there are probably 100 unknown SaaS plays in HR which don't get front page news anywhere,
right,
but still sell.
Healthy businesses.
That just shows that that's how big the market still is for certain products.
Of course.
So you could tomorrow, and I know this from not just HR, CRM, random things which you use on a daily basis, like HR software, like attendance software.
The POS software. On your chemist, I mean, there's just tons out there.
There are tons and tons out there who have successfully sold, from a point of view that, they have good salespeople on the team. So sales as a skill, very important. But also realizing that there is a market.
There is a market.
Realizing that there is no winner takes all yet on that.
No, winner takes all is a very kind of weird thing, right? I mean, like they say that in tech, winner takes all. But I mean, like, seriously, how many places have we seen that outside of search?
Oh, no, of course. No. I'll disagree there. Winner takes all. Apple's taking all the profits.
Apple's taking all the profits, but...
and again, that's because of the ecosystem.
I don't know if Apple is taking all the profits. A lot of these companies...
But it is. No, it's not to know.
They have a lot of profit, but I don't know if they're taking a lot, if they're taking all the profits.
So I may be getting my numbers wrong, but 80% in the handset industry, 98% of the profit accrues to Apple. There's a reason they're going to be $1 trillion company. Right?
Okay. So they have an ecosystem play. They're not just the phone. They're the app store. They're everything.
The phone
there are network effects in play through the phone.
I think that's a slightly outdated number too. We'll check on that. But I mean, because if today Apple worldwide is at 17% in terms of sales, right? So I mean, not all of these guys are losing money. The hardware players are not losing money.
Most of them are.
Not much.
I mean, yeah, Samsung makes a lot of money through its component business and so on and so forth. But, if you were to look at something like gross margins.
Right. No, I'm not saying Apple has much bigger margins compared to unit sales, but it's massively different, right? But I mean, like, all these guys are in business. They're not.
So I'll tell you this. I mean, the best advice in terms of how to look at margins I got was, we had this gentleman, he's at Pepsi now, Shiv Kumar, who used to head Nokia India. And I remember he once said that, margins are something you only give up once and you never get them back. Once you've given up your margins, every percentage of margin that you give up, you never get it back. And I've remembered that forever. And every time when I've fought, I would reduce the size of a deal, but I would not reduce the margin on a deal because that advice has stuck with me and I've seen it happen. Right.
Yeah,
so if you look at these Chinese phone plays, right? OnePlus, Xiaomi, right? People talk about Xiaomi makes barely any money.
Right.
But they're everywhere.
Yeah.
And as a matter of fact, Xiaomi has a huge market share in the country. I don't know the precise numbers, of course, but you see Xiaomi phone everywhere.
Yeah.
But from the news that you read, right, Xiaomi barely makes any money. HTC.
Yeah, I get that.
HTC is that perennially loss-making company. Gross margins, you've given them up. I would think. I mean, I don't know the numbers, but if you look at the other handset manufacturers outside of Apple, no gross margins are probably
I
not
understand
looking
that.
at.
I absolutely understand that Apple makes a lot more money than all these other people do. But these people are also rational actors, right? They're not going to continue staying in this business if they don't see a path to money making. And people are not going to fund them if they don't see a path to money making at some point, right? And the sheer number of people using Android as opposed to iPhone, it's 4 times that number. So, I mean, like, to me, that says that there is something over there. So, my point being, it's not winner take all. That's the only point I'm trying to make here. It's not, it's
I think it differs from product play to product play.
It does.
Right? There may be a winner take all in a mobile phone.
I don't think
there may or may not be a winner take all in desktop CRM.
So the only places where I see winner take all, and I mean, like, I've thought about this quite a bit, right? Because part of what I'm doing is with this winner take all idea. So I've thought about this a bit, and the only 2 places where I say winner take all is search and social media.
OSs.
I don't think it's
operating
winner take all.
system. Yes.
Yeah,
Windows.
Windows.
98% market share, one point of time.
Enough.
So look, all I'm saying is that maybe I think that perhaps we differ on the definition of winner takes all. Look, in anything tech, right? Power always accrues to the most efficient player, right? Especially when tech has been so consumerized, right? If you look at Sony in its heyday, right? I mean, there was Sony and there was literally nothing else, right?
Correct.
If you look at the mobile phone, the amount of mind share that Apple has, right? I sometimes think that there are a few people who love their Android devices, but everybody else wishes they had an iPhone, but they can't afford it, so they have an Android device, right? And remember, I'm actually not that biased to Apple. I would switch away from an iPhone someday. But all I'm saying is that, I think every Android sale is a sale that could have been an iPhone sale if there was an iPhone available at that price point with those features, so to speak, right? I mean, I'm speaking to your example, but look at software. Look at Salesforce. Right?
Okay.
In SaaS, Salesforce is a behemoth.
Right.
Look at Evernote. Right? Evernote created a category for itself, right?
It did.
Evernote and there is OneNote. While OneNote and Evernote, I don't know the exact market share, but
actually
the mind
pretty
share,
close to each other now at this point because Microsoft's been aggressive about promoting.
Yeah, because
OneNote.
I think Evernote also
has had some issues.
Yeah,
there
had
some
issues in
sync
the middle.
issues and problems.
But I think in tech, the general motion is that if somebody starts doing something well, they accrue more and more power.
I push back against that because I feel like that's conventional wisdom that's going out these days, right? That, I mean, like, it is a winner-take-all situation in most tech businesses. And I don't know. I don't feel like that is... I'm not saying that there isn't a dominant player and then a number of lesser players. But winner takes all, right? I mean, like, the way Google dominates search or Facebook dominates social, I don't think that that there's a similar winner-takes-all in a lot of other parallel industries. And again, I could be wrong about this, but
these are fundamentally industries with ingrained network effects,
exactly,
right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, you tend to do what the next guy does simply because if you don't, you're an outcast.
And what happens?
And remember, the ultimate goal of every business is to become a monopoly.
Yeah, absolutely.
To become
Absolutely.
so big,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely.
I mean, if you're a business that doesn't have that aspiration, you're really not fundable.
No, I agree with that. I agree that every business wants to be a monopoly, right? I think that that should be an aspiration for sure. But I don't know, man.
We're harking back to our namesake of the show because this is like a chapter in 0 to 1 in Peter Thiel's book. But no, I agree that yes, there are paradigms where a monopoly is the eventual goal for someone, but at the same time, I think the point I was trying to make was there are scenarios where your market is so big, especially again in context of startups, right? When people start up today, a lot of people will not think of making another Uber today. Well, let's say they probably won't try making an Uber,
right?
Simply because of the kind of scale they have achieved, but at the same time, the number 2 guy in every country is probably going to be as successful.
Exactly.
Okay, but there may not be a number 3,
yeah,
or a 4, or a 5.
Yeah, fine. I mean, like,
but that's where the interesting thing is, right? I mean, if you see what's happening with Uber, right, that's actually a great counter narrative to what you're basically talking about, right? Yeah. If you're really big and if you're the number 1 and if you screw up, right? There's a lot of optionality in the number 2, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So, I mean, Lyft raised, Uber is obviously having some current trouble. It's a great company, very innovative and all that. Of course, they have some really, the news coming out is fairly nasty and clearly they have leadership issues and whatnot. And I hope they get out of this well. Because it's, at the end of the day, Uber's innovation has literally changed lives.
The game, yeah.
Right? But look at what happened when Uber's trouble started, right? Lyft raised, I think, was it $500 million?
Something like that, yeah. Yeah, because the upside on Lyft is so tremendous, right? If Uber screws the pooch completely, then at that point, the upside that Lyft has on this thing is massive, right? All of a sudden, Lyft goes from a $5 billion company to a $100 billion company.
And Ola also just suddenly got some 50 million spare change from someone as well.
Yeah, I wouldn't know about Ola, but, come on, think about it, right? I mean, if Uber got sued yesterday for that really very distasteful incident, right?
Yeah.
I mean, clearly Uber had a lot of people with very distasteful tendencies working for them, right? And for whatever it's worth, what they're going through, kind of like a purge, right? Is probably good for them in the long run. But, if Uber really messes it up in India, Ola wins.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Effectively wins because once you have that, and by the way, it's cheaper because Ola doesn't have to fight the discounting war anymore.
Yeah.
Right. And then perhaps
they win the moral war.
But that's bad for consumer war.
But here's the thing: if Ola then becomes the big guy, then there's a lot of opportunity for people to start these. Maybe then because you book an Uber Black, and maybe I've never gotten a BMW Uber Black, right? That's what I keep hearing about. Somebody got, right? But I've never got.
So maybe only in that first month.
So the first 3 months, I got one BMW, I got one Audi Q7, and I got one Jaguar.
So business opportunity right now, right? Do a Uber Black competitor for the likes of Sheila.
A real Uber Black.
An Uber Black that actually the BMW shows up. Hey, maybe there's money in that. Maybe eventually people of Sheila's segment don't want to ride in an Ola, and maybe they say, let's just go for that
just
guy that the BMW shows up.
Yeah,
I'm the only guy who doesn't own a car here, and I'm 24/7 on
I don't have
paid
a car.
cabs.
I don't have a car.
That's my segment, right?
I don't have a car either.
Yeah. Well, anyway.
Well, I live out of Bombay, so I have to have a car.
But great! I think. That was a fun hour we already spent talking. I didn't realize. But on the last point, what I was trying to say is probably people won't try and make another Uber or an Ola today as a startup. But you could still probably go fight the CRM war or the HR software war or any other war. And if you're half decent with sales, you'll still make it.
Yeah. You could start another Ola or Uber. The Reliance thing we were talking about, right? How Jio is the quickest to 100 million customers.
Yeah.
The reason for that being because they were able to put so much money behind this, right? So you could find an Uber or Ola if you had insane buttloads of capital to invest in this stuff, then you can get into this.
There's always a lever which you can use. Who was it who said that give me a big enough lever and I'll move the earth?
Exactly.
Right?
Archimedes, man.
Archimedes had the lever thing, but there was somebody else who said, I don't think it was Archimedes, but somebody said, give me a big enough lever, right? And it's actually very interesting, right? I mean, Jio's like the perfect example of you have a market that's stable and you have a lot of these operators. There was a time when you said 500 rupees for a GB of data, right? And you could probably get a little bit of this, and then suddenly Jio comes in and change the narrative. And look what growth! I think it took them 5-6 months or so to get to 100 million users. That's 10 crore people. I mean, that's amazing. That's what 10%.
That's twice Netflix active user base across the world.
Across the world, there you go. I mean, Jio, a global company being built right out of what, Navi Mumbai?
Yes.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's a call back to where Kuldeep has to drive all the way back today. But great. I think we had a great chat. Thanks so much for making the drive all the way here, Kuldeep.
Oh, it was awesome. Thank you.
Just 1 minute before we wrap
yeah.
up, people, iTunes reviews, iTunes ratings, ratings and reviews on other podcast apps and stuff like that. Just please send us please do these kinds of things. And again, the Slack channel reminder.
Yes, join our Slack group. We are
ivmpodcast.com/Shunya One. There's a button over there where you can request an invitation to the Slack channel.
Yes, and we hope to have more discussion topics posted by everyone on this channel there.
Yes.
And we'll talk about what's happening in tech next week. Thanks so much, guys. Thank you so much for a wonderful hour again.
It was awesome talking to you, Sheila.
And hope to see you back again soon, Kuldeep.
Yeah, hopefully.
All right. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Anupam Gupta. I'm B50 on Twitter. I am the host of Paisa Vaisa, a show that talks money. On my show, I speak to experts from every field of money and finance, from stock markets, equities, debt funds, credit cards, life insurance, every possible area of money and finance that you can think of. We even did an episode on cryptocurrency. I've got fantastic guests from mutual funds to personal finance experts everywhere. Robo-advisory, startups, just name it, we've got it. At Paisa Vaisa, we help you make smart decisions about money. You work hard for money. Now make your money work hard for you. New episodes out every Monday, and you can listen to my show on the IVM Podcast app or any other podcasting app that you have.
Ladies and gentlemen, you are about to listen to attempt number 15 to record the promo for the podcast Vartalab.
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 All day, all night, Vartalab.
Oh yeah. It's a really nice podcast, guys. It's with me and Naveen, and it has really nice stories.
Yeah, people come tell their stories, ups and downs, fun times. We all cry at the end. It's like a Karan Joy movie, but in 1 hour or less.
Yay.
Yeah, every Monday. Yeah.
It's got you.